Growing up, we've always been told, work hard, go to college, and you can afford the American dream. I'm Canadian, and as much as Canadians would hate to admit it, we're pretty similar to the Americans, so it really applies to both of us.
But what actually is the American dream, and is it still attainable? Traditionally, the dream has been associated with a successful career, wealth, and home ownership. Popular conceptions of the American dream also focus on the ability to achieve more success than one's parents, causing some to believe that the opportunity to realize the dream is declining.
But lately, it seems like no matter how hard we try, no matter how dedicated we are to these goals, the goalposts just keep on moving. Let's break down the dream. From university to getting a job, and then to finally everything else that comes with life, like a house, kids, and just be able to be alive. I remember when I graduated high school, I was looking at university like, do I really want to be doing this? Personally, I was already looking at it through the lens of if I don't know exactly what I want to do, then this degree is basically useless. But obviously, my dad wasn't having any of this because, immigrants, you know how it goes. So off to university I went. That is until I dropped out. I won't lie though, low-key, the vibes of college still does partly what it was meant to do. And I'm talking about in terms of building actual relationships outside of the fact that you're just in the same class as someone all day, every day, like you would be in high school. It fosters your first real exposure to networking. But honestly, that's about as far as it goes. University used to be for people to specifically further their knowledge in very relevant fields. Now, with all the useless degree offerings, you really gotta think, are they low-key trying to sabotage us? Like, why do people need to be having these kind of degrees?
Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm studying the unseen body and creative spaces, erasure and exposure of the queer.
Hey, I'm Nina, and I studied the arts, education, and social justice.
I'm Joyce. I studied decolonial intimacies, indigenous politics, and resistance.
I'm Victoria, and I studied remembering or forgetting, navigating international conflict through collective memory.
Hi, I'm Kira, and I studied textiles and environmental justice.
Hi, I'm Nunyala. I'm studying living artfully, art as ritual therapy, and pathways of decoloniality.
I'm Naomi, and I'm studying Black political economy.
Hi, I'm Natalie, and I'm studying fashion history and gender studies.
My name is Marie, and my concentration is the radical disruption for survival, development in sub-Saharan Africa, and social anthropology.
And then, as if it wasn't already bad enough that you're getting such a useless degree, but you're paying such an eye-watering price for this piece of paper. Like, it's to the point where universities are literally like, oh, you'd pay for this?
Oh, say less.
The crazy part is that even if you claim bankruptcy, at least in America, those student loans, they're still gonna be there.
I never got around to fully explaining how I ended up with $160,000 of student debt.
I talked to a chiropractor the other day on the Ramsey show, and she was wanting to stay home with the kids. And she was like, well, I'm about to have my second baby and I want to stay home. And she still owed over $200,000 in student loan debt. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
those loans that you signed off on when you're 18 or 19 that can almost rival the price of someone's mortgage. But hey, you can't drink yet. You can't drink yet. At least if you're getting a degree in the STEM field, you have the hope and potential of making a lot more money in the future so that you can actually pay off those loans. Which brings us to the next stage of the American dream. Jobs. We were told to get a degree so you can get a good job and then you can make a lot of money. But even if you're in the STEM fields like we just talked about, are having a lot of difficulty in this market. We've seen what's been happening over the last couple of years with these massive layoffs, the biggest players in tech just slashing their workforce, and we all saw what happened when Doge was ripping through the American government for the sake of government efficiency. If you knew how much the US government spends on Viagra, all I can say is there's other places he could have been cutting costs. Anyway, if the people in STEM aren't safe, how do you think the basket weaving degree people are doing? Spoiler alert, the American dream is quickly fading away for them.
Well, amid mass layoffs and uncertainty over the impact of artificial intelligence, more Californians are headed back to the classroom. That's led to a surge in enrollment at community colleges. Lev Ramirez introduces us to a student who went back to school all to protect his future.
So as if the market wasn't bad enough with all the layoffs that are supposedly due to AI, they aren't actually related to AI. Like, companies don't actually use AI as much as they want you to think. Not that they don't use it at all, but not as much as they want you to think. It's basically just a cover for them to lay off a bunch of people, and then when they rehire those people, they can do it at a lower cost, again, to maximize shareholder value.
Amazon, Chegg, Microsoft, Meta, Salesforce, the list continues. Tech companies just are cutting tens of thousands of jobs, and some of them are blaming AI. But at NVIDIA's GTC in DC yesterday, top CEOs were telling us something completely different about what's driving these cuts. For example, Perplexity CEO says the AI narrative is missing the point. Listen in.
Overhiring they did in the COVID era when they didn't actually need to. The results of that are being seen now. So correlation doesn't imply causation. Like, it's not because of AI that people are losing jobs.
But since everyone is so desperate to just have a job after all these mass layoffs, obviously they have the leverage. But that's a story for another day. This brings us to our final boss stage of the American dream, life. Specifically home ownership, because this is the pinnacle of the American dream. The dream is to get your own house with a white picket fence and have a couple of your little kiddos running around. We were told that if we did everything right, worked hard, went to school, climbed the corporate ladder, made a lot of money, this would be our end destination. In reality, even if your household income is like 150 to 200K a year, which by the way is very difficult to obtain, don't let the internet fool you into thinking everyone is pushing 10 to 15K per month in their household. The median income in an American household is around 80K per year, and for Canada, it's about 74K. And obviously that's in our respective currencies, 80K USD, 74K Canadian. Canada is going through it. The thing to note here and why I'm saying it is because that is the median, not the average, the median. So it's directly in the middle of everything. It's not skewed by super high earners or super low earners. It's the direct middle of what everyone makes in America or Canada. So keep that in mind, and then think about, again, the 150 to 200K. Even if you make that as a household, you still can afford this American dream that has been sold to us all these years with all this propaganda.
The American dream is not dead, so much as it's an extreme luxury in many parts of the country that can now cost as much as $10 million to afford. That's more than most of us will ever earn in our lifetimes before taxes, interest payments, and basic essentials like food. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but holding on to the traditional financial wisdom of what you ought to have in life is now permanently out of reach for most people. And as more Americans realize this, it's fundamentally reshaping our economy.
So we can't afford or even barely be approved for a mortgage. Birth rates are declining because it's so expensive to just breathe air, let alone bring another human into this world. Since the reality is clearly different than what we were promised, and boomers clearly pulled that ladder up behind them, what do? The goalposts have clearly shifted and have gotten smaller. So instead of trying to score on their goalposts, we create our own. Obviously, this is going to differ from person to person. I've thought about it and done this a couple times in my life. For example, how I talked about dropping out of uni earlier in this video. I genuinely couldn't fathom and see how that path could benefit the type of person that I am. So I had to make the executive decision to be like, hey, this is actually not in line with my goals. I don't think going through these goalposts is actually going to put points on the board for me. And honestly, I was right. It's one of the better decisions that I've ever made in my entire life. The next thing is me altering the goalposts on home ownership. And I say altering and not making a whole new one because I do want kids in the future, and the most ideal situation would be to have a home to have them in. But honestly, this whole housing market stuff across the entire world is cooked. Not even just in Canada. It's definitely worse in Canada. And people talk about America like, oh, your low prices, but your houses are also made out of paper. And across the world, people are having a hard time affording homes. But I also refuse to fall for the propaganda that owning a home is always better than renting. Because people seem to forget that when you're looking at the numbers and whatnot, they're like, oh, your mortgage is this much, your rent is this much, yada yada. The rent that you pay is the maximum that you're gonna pay per month. But with your mortgage, that is the bare minimum. So people like to compare numbers. They always say your rent is gonna be higher than your mortgage, whatever it may be. But that is just the beginning stages. What happens when you need to repair your roof? You need to replace a water heater. Any and sort of thing, not even talking about HOAs and like all that kind of stuff. Like all that stuff adds up really quickly. So there's that part. And then there's also the fact that at least in Canada, everyone's wealth is tied up in their home. And that's a major reason why prices are probably never gonna go down. But on the flip side of it, that I don't think a lot of people will be talking about, you gotta think about it. If no one is able to afford your home, your basic starter home for $2 million that you're trying to sell, is it really that price? Is it really worth that? And can you even consider the wealth that you built in that home real? Because people always talk about, oh, at least you're building equity when you're owning and not renting. But if you can't sell at a good price, is your wealth really real? Like, obviously there's wealth to a degree because you're not going to sell your house for $0, but your $2 million isn't $2 million.
A 71-year-old woman in Oakville just discovered she's not a millionaire. She thought she was. Her house is assessed at $1.3 million. She's lived there 32 years, paid it off a decade ago. On paper, she's rich. In reality, she just listed her house for the 4th time in 8 months. 3 price cuts, 0 offers.
What happens when real estate asset prices come down or real estate becomes so unaffordable when they want to sell or downsize? They can't because there's no buyers at that price point that can afford it. This is a Wall Street Journal article that came out in 2019. It says, okay, boomer, who's going to buy your 21 million homes? That's the estimate of homes that they can see coming on the market moving forward. And sellers are freaking out. I can tell you right now, there's boomers who are looking to sell in my neighborhood that I live in, and they can't find buyers for them.
So here's my plan. Instead of buying someone's crazy overpriced home, my focus is entirely on maximizing my income and my real tangible assets, not having all my wealth be built up in a home. Because I want to be rich for real, not just rich on paper. I have a vision. I joke about this to my girlfriend sometimes. I'm like, oh, let's just go build a log cabin off in the middle of nowhere and just like kick rocks. And that's more of a joke, but in reality, I would absolutely love to build a house from scratch and possibly even have enough space where it's like building a little community. That part, the community part, is more of a stretch, but you get the concept of having your own space, building your own home. Because at least I figure if it's going to be a crazy amount, let it be mine. Then at least I'm not trying to score on the goalpost of feeding to this housing market of pumping out the prices, because the prices are always going to go up. Another person buys, it's going to be $100K more expensive in a couple of years with the way this market is going. Like, sure, my house could be valued at whatever it is, but if I don't plan to sell it, then it doesn't really matter. So in conclusion, we live in a world where the requirements to achieve our dream life are constantly moving, and this leads to a lot of frustration and depression. For a very long time, I was literally like, I cannot fathom owning a home if this is the way and specific route that I have to go about doing it. But at the end of the day, the people that win the most of this life don't play by the rules. Now, that isn't to say to do some bad or illegal things, but it is to say don't let the parameters and guidelines set by other people dictate the outcome of your life. There's actually a saying that I learned when I started learning videography and all the creative things, because there are some rules in the creative field, not many, but there are. And that is, you have to learn the rules before you can break them. But when you start breaking the rules, that's when the game really begins. Do with that information what you will, but hey, let's continue to chase greatness.